most beautiful man on the planet is back once more in Apple's Hijack. Idris Elba apparently didn't get enough of terrorists on a plane, so now he's experiencing the commandeering of a subway train. A Berlin underground train and its commuters are taken hostage, while above ground, authorities scramble to save hundreds of lives. Once again, Sam Nelson is at the heart of the crisis on board, where one wrong decision could spell disaster. Okay, so I've been bemoaning the fact that they were making a second season of Hijack ever since it was announced. And I've joked that the third installment would be Idris Elba on an escalator or perhaps a canal boat. Now, though, that I've watched season 2, I gotta eat my words. The story, it's not a cash grab or even a desperate plea for Apple to extend a story. The plot and story progression make sense and fit within the narrative of the first season pretty well. So we've got Elba as Sam on an underground train in Berlin when the line that he is on is taken over, along with the large amount of morning commuters who are on board. Christine Adams and Max Beasley return from season 1, but for new cast additions, we've got Christian Paul, Sebastian Hulk, Karima McAdams, Christian Knott, Lisa Vicari, and then Toby Jones. And while the majority of the focus is on the hijacked train, the story gives us the viewpoints of a few different perspectives, which at times kind of feels like they're useless tangents or maybe forgotten arcs, but they do end up coming around to tie in. Now, one major focus allows us inside the control center of the underground mass transit system. That is a high-pressure, tense arena, especially once the crap hits the fan. And I love how there's this uber calmness to all the outward actions of the characters in the command post. But their expressions, they clearly illustrate how suspenseful and nerve-wracking the whole situation is. The actors do a wonderful job of keeping this section of the plot in a sort of controlled chaos, maintaining the urgency and fear, but never having emotional outbursts as we see in other areas of the story. And this ends up balancing the emotion pretty well and then gives us a small reprieve from anything hectic without sacrificing the anxiety or the intensity of the scenes. There's also a focus, even though it is much smaller and shown less often, that centers around an investigation into a suspected terrorist. Now, this is the part of the series that feels kind of out of place, just simply because it's almost like an independent plot line that involves one detective doing his own thing. I know that is a bit vague, but to avoid some spoilers, especially because the series is a weekly drop, I don't want to give anything away inadvertently. But the show does finally connect some of the dots. Every time, though, that we went back to this area of the narrative, it just felt like a distraction that's almost meant to pad the runtime a little bit. Now, there are a couple of other associated storylines that help to add some misdirection, mystery, or even suspense. But what creates so much of the nervousness and unease for the show is all of the drama that's occurring on the hijacked train. Now, I love the variety of passengers we get. Some are instantly sketchy, some are completely vulnerable, and others are kind of enigmas. And I do think that one character, they're a bit obvious for their portion of the plot, but I also love that there are a few false leads to keep us guessing and on our toes. Now, something that's a bit of a trope within a story like this, but still somehow works for the show, is how many complications that the characters encounter, whether they be hijackers, authorities, or even the hostages. There are so many setbacks that are introduced that require the characters to then work a solution, sometimes under extreme duress. Now, a few do lean towards plot protection, but they mainly don't feel contrived or forced into the plot just simply for convenience's sake. With all that said, though, there are portions within the story that came across a bit clunky. I had the benefit of binging the entire season, and I still found some areas that felt rushed or maybe lacked sufficient information. As an example, I enjoyed Toby Jones in this, but his inclusion as an MI6 agent gets scattered about, making him less of a formidable addition and more of an afterthought. And because this story does have ties to the first season, you might want to watch the final episode or two of season 1 just to reacquaint yourself with what had happened. There isn't any flashbacks or previously on to remind us what happened before. We're just now taken to Germany to watch Idris Elba get on a train that is then ultimately taken over. Now, the 8 episodes, they're chunky, and they make for a decent weekly watch. But you may get a bit frustrated at the end of a few of them because they leave us on a cliffhanger with potentially gnarly outcomes that we don't get to see until the following week. Now, to its credit, the show uses the cramped spaces of the underground, along with the crowded subway cars, to introduce a lot of claustrophobic anxiety. So when we've got a bunch of hot and terrified bodies all crammed into a long metal box with the power cut and some smoke billowing in, we can feel the fear ratchet up and then the impending chaos build. But even with so much of this induced stress, Sometimes the whole thing feels a little long in the tooth. It's not like I was wishing the story to rush itself along or just skimp on development. It's just that the longer we spend with the hostages, some of the dread begins to dissipate thanks to the rinse and repeat cycle of complication, solution, argument, threat, and then we're on to the next series that is just a variation on the previous mishap. The more I talk about this, the less that it sounds like I enjoyed it. But even though there is a lot going on within the plot, featuring a handful of tangential storylines playing out simultaneously, some clunky character inclusions, and then a repetitive sort of storyboard, I was engaged in the series, and I got caught up in both the drama and the intrigue. Now, I'm still not sure the second season really needed to be made, but the way the writing ties this into the first season, it does ultimately work, and it creates a full arc that we didn't know we may have wanted. The acting is wonderful, drawing on restrained and emotionally expressive performances to drive the intensity and pressure without becoming a hysterical mess. Now, I love Idris Elba, but I do think it's time he gets off this ride and finds a whole new way to travel that doesn't involve anyone overtaking any sort of transportation. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a bunch of violence. I give season 2 of Hijack 3.5 out of 5 couches. So it's a good pressure cooker show that you've watched. Could be lately or really long ago. Either way, I would love to get some recommendations in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.